Hi everybody, Evan from Codify here, and today, first thing today, we're going to talk about object methods and the this variable. We're going to dig a little bit more deeply into the this variable. So, object methods. Well, last week you probably heard me mention that when I use the word methods, I'm typically referring to a function that follows a dot which follows an object. Something like document dot get element by ID, or just to mix it up, get elements by class name. This is a method. Get elements by class name is officially a method, which is a function called using dot notation on an object. Okay, so what does that mean behind the scenes? Well, what that means is somewhere there's an object called a document. We already know the document is an object. And that document has a property called get elements by class name, which contains a function. An object which contains a property which contains a function. And we are invoking the function inside that property, inside that object. So let's get a clearer idea of what that looks like. Remember, last week we used hotels as an example. Well, let's do that again, only this time with only one object. Name, Quay. Rooms, 225. Booked, 175. Price, 350. And rating, something like 4.3. Okay, so we have our hotel object now. Currently, the values in all of these properties are primitives, numbers, strings. Okay, they're all primitives, but nothing is to stop us from keeping arrays or other objects inside these properties. And a function is at its most fundamental an object. A function is an object. So there's no reason why we can't keep a function inside one of these properties. If you're not sure why you would ever want to do that, well, let's think about it this way. This is all static information which we have plugged into these properties inside this hotel object, but maybe there's another property which is not going to be static hard-coded data, but is going to be determined based on some of the other properties that exist in this object. For example, we have total rooms, 225, and we know that 175 of those rooms are booked. So what if we wanted to add a property that is occupancy rate? Occupancy rate. So this is going to be the percentage of the hotel that is currently booked up. Well, in regular old math, how would you find that? You would divide booked by rooms, right? In order to do that, we can't simply write arithmetic in here, but what we can do is write a function. And what this function is going to do is it's going to return this dot rooms, bear with me for a second. Actually, I'm sorry, this dot booked divided by this dot rooms. Okay, so now we have an occupancy rate property which contains a function which returns some numeric percentage, some numeric value that represents a percentage of the hotel which is occupied. So let's see this in action. Let me check my variable. Looks good. Let me check my variable name. Let me check variable rooms. Variable hotel.price. Looks good so far. And just for variety's sake, let's practice using the other nomenclature for accessing properties of object, just as a reminder. So that would be the equivalent of hotel.booked. And finally, hotel rating, 4.3. Okay, all looks good. How about occupancy rate? Hotel.occupancy rate. Well, if I do this, it's going to return a function. Okay, if you're confused about that, then take a moment, open your console, and type in document.get element by ID, or class name, or tag name, but don't include the parentheses, and hit enter. See what returns? It's a function. It's another function, just like occupancy rate. Okay, so if what we need to do in order to actually use get element by ID is follow it with those parentheses, which suggest invoking a function, then it stands to reason that to access something meaningful inside occupancy rate, we need to do the same. And that's our occupancy rate, 77.78%. The hotel is 77.78% occupied. In fact, why don't we format the return, the value that's returned from this function a little bit more so it looks a little more readable. This isn't necessary, but it's good practice. So we want to convert whatever this evaluates to a percentage. So multiply it times 100, and then we will add the percentage sign. How about that? Hotel.occupancy rate, parentheses. A little better. 77.777%. You get the idea. Okay, so the takeaway here is, one, we can definitely include a function inside an object property. It's actually quite common. And we can invoke whatever that function is by simply following the name of the property with those parentheses. This is called an object method. An object method. That function must return something, and whatever value it returns is going to be what is stored in that property for that object. Okay, and oh, I had something else here. Oh, yes, I didn't go into the use of this in this example. So you've probably seen this a couple of times before, but you may not have been clear on what it is. Well, let's first console.log this. What returns? It's this big window object, okay? If I write console.log this here in the global execution context, okay, outside of my object, outside of any function, in the global execution context, what returns is the window object. This is as big as you can get. Okay, but what this refers to changes based on its scope, based on the context in which it exists. So this exists in the global execution context and therefore refers to the window object. So the window object which runs your browser and the web page inside it and all the logic inside of that. But inside of a function, inside of an object, inside of an object, this refers to the object itself, the parent object, the containing object. So this right here is the equivalent of writing hotel.booked. Hotel.booked divided by hotel.rooms. And let's add another property just to demonstrate. I'm going to add a showThis property, which contains a function, which contains a console.log command to log this. Save, reload. There we have the window, and now I'm going to run hotel.showThis. And what returns is our hotel object. Name Quay, rooms 225, booked 175, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So, key takeaways. This inside of an object refers to the containing object. We can contain functions inside of properties. These functions must return something to store a value in these properties, but they don't have to. They can simply execute some code. If you can't think of a reason why this would be useful, well, occupancy rate is automatically calculated based on the value of some other properties. We could have any variety of properties which we no longer have to give a definition to. So let's try an even simpler method before we move on. I'm going to create a person object with a first name property and a last name property and a get full name method, which contains a function which returns this dot first name plus concatenated space plus this dot last name. Person dot get full name returns Evan Winston. Okay? So if you're still fuzzy on why this is useful, we'll address it, we'll get to it, we'll keep practicing with it, but hopefully at least you can appreciate the relationship that is happening here. Okay? This refers to the parent object, the containing object, the containing object when this exists inside of an object. On the global scope, the global execution context, this refers to the big window object that runs your browser and document.